The White House says that the U.S. is sending 10 F-35 fighter jets to Puerto Rico as part of an effort to combat drug cartels. This comes after the Pentagon says 2 Venezuelan military aircraft flew near a U.S. Navy vessel in the Caribbean yesterday.
So drug cartel is the euphemism we're using now, apparently. 22 years after, we're doing the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq thing all over again. And once again, it's the US government looking for a premise to invade an oil-rich country ruled by a president who won't submit to them. But that's where all the similarities end. Because this time it's not taking place in Africa or in the Middle East or in Asia, which have been among the most regular hunting grounds for US military invasions and regime change operations for decades. It's now happening much closer to home, and the reason for this apparently is that the US government has taken a good look at the military and geopolitical status of China and Russia and has decided that it no longer has the capacity to maintain its policy of strategic provocation halfway around the world, so now it's time to do it closer to home.
And DC's a little bit different because I could federalize it if I want. We have actually more power in DC because it's, I can change the mayor if I want. I can do whatever I want. I haven't had to.
In Panama, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, and elsewhere in the Americas, the US military is now boosting its presence as it pulls resources away from distant parts of the world. Remember, for many years, US foreign policy has been built around this imperial idea of strategic encirclement. That means multiple US military bases in the South China Sea and multiple US military bases within spitting distance of Russia's borders, which, needless to say, neither the Chinese nor the Russians have been particularly thrilled about. Now, according to Washington insiders, the Imperial Death Star has decided to pivot away from trying to stamp its authority on nuclear powers on the other side of the planet and focus all that imperial energy and military adventurism on Latin America. Now, this of course does not mean that the US intends to stop being an Imperial Death Star. What it does mean is that it now prioritizes the full spectrum domination of its immediate neighborhood in keeping with a core tenet of US foreign policy called the Monroe Doctrine. Formulated under US President James Monroe in 1823, the Monroe Doctrine basically states that no geopolitical player is allowed to have a presence in the Western Hemisphere except the US. In other words, European imperial powers were to focus their imperial energies exclusively on Asia and Africa, but South America, Central America, and the Caribbean were the sole property of the US and off limits to everybody else. Of course, this also meant that no country in the region is truly sovereign in the eyes of the US. And the world saw a practical demonstration of what this meant when the CIA carried out a violent coup killing thousands in Guatemala in 1954 on behalf of the United Fruit Company, which is nowadays known as Chiquita. More recently, in 1989, this idea of unfettered and unrestricted US control over its purportedly sovereign neighbors was demonstrated with the US military invasion of Panama, a bloody military campaign staged to arrest Panamanian President Pablo Noriega. Hundreds, maybe thousands of civilians died, and no one really paid any price for this. Eventually, Noriega was paraded with a mugshot, just to make the point that as far as the US empire is concerned, everybody in its neighborhood is only as sovereign as it allows them to be. So now, having accepted that victory in Ukraine is not a realistic outcome, and that the strategic encirclement of China is not just not working, but is spectacularly backfiring, it looks like the US empire has decided to cut its losses and return closer to home so that it can focus on bullying its most regular punching bags in Latin America and the Caribbean. Already, 11 Venezuelan civilians have paid the ultimate price for being in the wrong place at the wrong time as a declining empire seeking to reassert itself as a local champion through a deadly tantrum. Let's hope it doesn't get worse than this.